In this training, I'm going to share with you some of the equipment that I think you need to grow a mindful garden, especially if you don't have oodles of time in which to garden. I have put this list on your worksheet, so feel free to print it off and scribble next to each item if you want to. You will see that there are some items I consider essential and some that are nice to have, as they make your life easier, save you time or effort. Let's start with what to grow. First up is seeds, probably the most labour intensive of anything you can grow in the garden, but the most rewarding. I try to sow as many of the seeds that I can direct into the soil, as sowing them in pots requires more of your time and attention. Having said that, there are some seeds that I sow in pots because it provides 20 minutes of mindful gardening that my brain needs to switch off. Plus, it will enable you to have an earlier harvest of things like tomatoes, sweet peas. If you have a mindful gardening planner, you will see each month which seeds I recommend to sow in pots in the greenhouse, cold frame, or indoors, and which can be sown directly into the soil. I will cover more on this in our next module, Seed Sowing to Benefit Your Mind. If you prefer not to spend your time sowing seeds, you can of course buy ready-grown plants at your local garden centre and plant them straight out into the garden. However, this will cost you more money. I tend to do a mix of seeds and plants because as a busy mum, I often run out of time to get all my seeds sown. I'm going to say this extra loud for those at the back. There is no shame in buying plug plants rather than seeds. Just because everyone else is sowing up a storm doesn't mean you have to. You do you. Bulbs can be a bit of a halfway house between plants and seeds. Quite labour and time intensive to plant initially, but by selecting the right varieties and with minimal aftercare, the same bulbs will come back again year after year. Now onto the equipment you will need for sowing seeds. Essential items are pots or containers of varying sizes. Don't feel you have to buy new, you can raid your recycling bin for suitable containers. Old mushroom containers are great, as are the fruit containers with the holes in the bottom. If you do use containers from your recycling, just make sure you make holes in the bottom of them before you sow your seeds. I like to use something called soil blockers, which is a gadget that creates blocks of soil for you to sow the seeds directly into. I find it saves me space, time, as I'm not having to wash fiddly pots, and I'm not buying plastic to sow into. You will also need some compost, preferably peat-free, which you can buy from your local garden centre or make your own. More on this in our composting and soil improving module. Plant labels can be as fancy as these lovely slate ones, or as simple as a used lolly stick or an old margarine tub cut up into strips. A pen, I recommend these art line garden markers as they don't fade in the sun. A heat mat provides bottom heat to your seeds to help them germinate. They aren't essential, but they will increase the number of your seeds that germinate considerably. Capillary matting can be used in conjunction with or without heat mats to keep your seeds watered for longer and save you time. You sit your seed tray or pot on top of it and it absorbs the water poured onto it as you water your plants and slowly releases it back to the plant's roots as it needs it. Some sort of container with which to hold water to water your seeds, either a watering can or for small seeds, I advise watering them from below by filling a gravel tray with water and then sitting your pots of seeds into it to soak up the water. Once your seeds have germinated, they will need potting on. I have this little tool which is ideal for prizing seedlings out of seed trays, but you could just as easily use an old teaspoon. For planting out your plants, whether home sown or bought as plug plants, you will need a trowel for smaller plants or a spade for bigger plants. You will need somewhere to plant your plants, either a patch of ground or a container filled with compost. If you are growing climbing plants, you will need some trellis or some bamboo canes for them to scramble up. I'll talk more about plant supports later in the season. Throughout the growing season, your plants will need watering, feeding, and weeding. You will need something to keep your plants watered with. My preferred utensil of choice is a watering can, as the rose makes a wonderfully mindful sound as it delivers the water to the soil around your plants. However, it is quite time and labour intensive, so I also recommend using a hose and or soaker hoses that lay in your beds and leach water out of them onto the soil around. You can use sprinklers, but they tend to wet the plant's leaves, which can actually cause the plants more problems when it's sunny. I'll explain more about this and how to water to benefit your plants in our module, How and When to Water Your Plants, later in the season. Fertiliser and plant food is a huge topic in its own right, which is why it has its own module. What should you feed your plants and how often? So all I'll say for now is you will need some, but I'm going to guide you through what you need and when the time is right. So put it out of your mind for now. So trowel, hoe or hand fork. Your choice of weeding implement is such a personal choice. My preferred favourite is a trowel. I just like the way it feels in my hands. If you're unsure, head to the garden centre and test a few out. Hold them in your hands and see how they feel. Practice the digging motion with them and notice what comes up for you. Sure, you may get some funny looks, but we are all about starting to shake off that societal expectation of others here in the Mindful Gardening Club. Be your wonderful true self, proudly and confidently. Hoes can be good for small weed seedlings as they allow you to stand up while you weed, which is better on your knees. However, they won't deal with perennial weeds. So you will need a trowel or a hand fork to deal with those pesky blighters. The last stage is harvesting. Many of the vegetables and fruits you harvest in your garden will be pickable with your bare hands, straight from the plant. However, for cut flowers and some food, a pair of snips or secateurs are required. Your secateurs will also come in handy to prune back your plants during the growing season. There are many brands and types out there available to purchase, but I do find where I've been able to spend a little bit more money on a higher quality pair, they have lasted much longer. I find they are a really good gift to put on your Christmas list or birthday list, so you actually get something that you want from your mother-in-law. If you want to make bouquets and arrangements of flowers, some pieces of raffia, twine or string will come in handy. Twine or string will come in very handy tying plants into supports through the season soon. A selection of vases or simple jam jars of varying shapes and sizes will allow you to bring a slice of Mother Nature inside with you and bolster that connection you feel as you work or eat dinner with your friends and family. Whilst not an essential item, flower food will prolong the life of any flowers that you cut from the garden. You can buy it in granular or liquid form. Lastly, a couple of items that will help you stay clean and prevent your hands from turning into wizened, scaly claws. Gardening gloves will provide a layer of protection from any sharp thorns, rash-inducing plants or stinging nettles. However, I do advocate getting your hands in the bare soil as much as possible, as it contains a bacteria that reduces your stress levels. I know, right? There have definitely been times when I've been tempted to bathe in it. A good quality nail brush will help you to get the mud out from under your fingernails and the grooves in your skin before slathering on plenty of thick, good quality hand cream to replenish the moisture, getting your hands wet and dirty, saps from your skin. My personal fave is the Gardener's Hand Cream by Crabtree and Evelyn. It was the only thing that rehydrated my skin after long days at the flower stall. If there are things you don't already have, come and share with us in the group and ask for recommendations of brands. On the flip side, if you have something that you love to use, come and rave about it so the rest of us can try it out.